Coming up on Midco Sports tonight, our FCS panel gives their argument for the top impact player in the Missouri Valley. High school experts Jason Andera and Jody Norstead break down the football and volleyball rankings in the Dakotas and hear from the Sioux Falls Little League players and coaches about their World Series experience. All of that and a lot more, Midco Sports Tonight kicks off right now. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Kelly Stewart. We're jumping right into football this week. We had our Missouri Valley experts choose their top 5 impact players in the league. We used a point system for this. The experts ranked their choice for number 1 with 5 points, number 2 with 4 points, number 3 with 3 points, etc. Jason Andera tallied them up, and here's what we have. Coming in at number 5, it's number 5 for Missouri State, Dione Holloman. He's a senior wide receiver, but is more notably known for the damage he can do on special teams as a kick returner. 4 career return touchdowns, with 2 of those coming last year. Holliman averaged 24 yards per kick return in 2016 and holds a 13.9-yard career average on punt returns. Next at number 4, the reigning Missouri Valley Offensive Player of the Year, South Dakota State quarterback Tarun Christian. He's got a laundry list of awards and honors, but I think his 2016 numbers can speak for themselves. 3,714 passing yards last season to go with 335 yards on the ground. This guy accounted for just over 4,000 yards of total offense for the Jacks, and he did it efficiently, a 64% completion rate on those passes. Also, 13 passing touchdowns to just 9 interceptions. Rolling in at number 3 on our top 5 impact players is another quarterback, USD's Chris Streveler, a dual threat guy that played his first season in the Valley last year, accounting for 1,947 yards passing with 22 touchdowns to 9 interceptions and a team leading 823 yards on the ground, including 9 touchdowns there. Streveler is the reigning Missouri Valley Newcomer of the Year and is entering his final season with the Yotes. Moving to number 2, our first Bison on the list, NDSU linebacker Nick DeLuca. Although 2016 saw him miss the majority of the season with a shoulder injury, he was the only FCS player nominated for the Dick Butkus Award, which is presented annually to the top linebacker in all of college football. And even though he injured that shoulder in the season opener against Charleston Southern, he came back in Game 2 of the year to make 15 tackles, plus a 40-yard interception return for a touchdown in an overtime win against Eastern Washington. Then finally, we all remember the NDSU Iowa game, Joey Beltran, which ended up being his last game before surgery in 2016. He had 8 tackles, 6 of those were solo stops in the Bison win over those 11th-ranked Hawkeyes. Finally, we're here. Our panel's number 1 top impact player in the Valley goes to South Dakota State tight end Dallas Goedert. Like his teammate Tarun Christian, he's got a laundry list of awards and accomplishments, unanimous All-America selection, things like that. But let's talk about his 2016 numbers. 92 receptions for 1,293 yards and 11 touchdowns a year ago. And by the way, ESPN draft guru Todd McShay ranked Goedert as the top tight end in the country. So there's that. Other players in the discussion, but not the top 5, SDSU wideout Jake Winicky, NDSU corner Trey Dempsey, Youngstown State QB Hunter Wells, Western Illinois running back Steve McShane, SDSU defensive tackle Kellen Sulik, and Western Illinois linebacker Brett Taylor. Well, needless to say, guys, we have a lot of talent going on in the Valley. So to talk a little bit more about that, to hash some things out, we have our panel of Missouri Valley Football Conference experts. That's Brian Shawn up in West Fargo, Jay Elsen and Tom Nieman here with me in Sioux Falls. So guys, looking at these lists, not all of you voted Goedert as number 1. Tom, I am looking directly at you. You're our SDSU guy. You didn't even vote Goedert as number 1. So I want to know the reasons behind that. We'll start with you. What's your reason? And then to everyone else after, who else do you think could be in that number 1 spot?
All right, I did. There's a great reason for it, actually, and actually there's not. But the reason was because out of 5 guys, I could have put 4 Jackrabbits on there, and there wouldn't have been room for anybody else on the list. That's the main reason. But obviously, Dallas Goedert and Jake Winicky are going to be huge impact players for the Jackrabbits this year. Tarun Christian had 30 touchdown passes last year. 27 of them went to those 2 guys, including 16 to Jake Winicky. So they're a huge impact group, no doubt about that. But Christian is the guy that makes it all work. And without him, the other guys are impact players, but don't have as big of an impact, I guess you could say. Christian has an impact on every play, and if you had to pick one of those guys out of those three, that big three for South Dakota State that you absolutely have to have, I think it's Tarun Christian.
But you could make the argument that Christion wouldn't be as impactful without guys like Dallas Goedert and Jake Winicki to throw the football to. And so I totally agree. I mean, Tarun Christian certainly deserves a place on this list, but I think Goedert is just such a freak athletically and causes such a nightmare for opposing defenses that he's a guy that's going to make plays regardless of who's throwing him the football, because he's going to find ways to get open. He's almost impossible to cover, at least he was last year as a junior. Got to imagine it's going to be even more difficult this year now that he's got that much more experience under his belt. But I just think, I don't know how you look anywhere else other than Dallas Goedert at the top.
I can't argue. I had to be contrarian, so I went with Tarun Christian.
Bichon, do you think
I would
anything
have
about
to say, I think to me, I'm more along the lines with Tom. I think Tarun Christian is really the straw that stirs the drink for South Dakota State. I think you take him out of the lineup, South Dakota State offensively looks a lot different. How many times did he take off and run and get a big first down, keep plays alive with his legs? He throws the ball way better than I thought he did when I saw him up live last year. He is a playmaking guy, and to me, the quarterback matters. He handles the ball the most, and is a guy that I think offers so many different dimensions because of athleticism, and that's why I would have to pick Christian. But to me, if you look at guys that are most important to their team, it's Streveler. I think he is critically important for South Dakota because of his ability to not only throw the ball but run. Second year in the offense, I think he's also, to me, would be 1B in that discussion as well.
All right, well, Bichon, you're tooting the SDSU and USD horns. You're a NDSU guy, so that's a little surprise. But
well, Nick DeLuca obviously is a huge part of what they do. He's a pro prospect. Who knows what North Dakota State would have done with him, but he didn't play the last how many games last year, and the Bison still got to the national semifinals without him. So it's hard for me to say that he is the guy compared to those other two. I look at guys that are most impactful to their team. I think North Dakota State is deeper defensively, where I don't know if South Dakota State or South Dakota has that second option when it comes to the quarterbacks.
Yes, absolutely. DeLuca, there's a lot of impact players on that North Dakota State team with Dunn and Dempsey and Easton Stick, even at the quarterback. But DeLuca, amongst impact players, stands out. And he has that kind of psychological impact on other teams, and I think that's a huge deal for Nick DeLuca.
Well, and I think, I get the argument of multiple impact players on one team, but DeLuca is a guy that I see what Brian's saying about they made it to the national semifinals without him. They didn't win that game. And I think DeLuca being on the field in that game would have made a difference. Would have been enough of a difference? It's impossible to say. But I just think, especially with the injury to Greg Menard, Nick DeLuca, I think is more important now than even he would have been had Menard not gone down in the preseason with an injury. So it's a great defense. It's going to be a great defense pretty much whether or not DeLuca's out there, whether or not Menard's out there. The Bison that's what they're built around. They're going to do it. Nate Tangway being back certainly going to help them as well. But I think DeLuca deserves consideration, certainly at the top of this list. I think he's very impactful for that North Dakota State team.
And if you're going to look at just linebackers, you got Christian Roseboom at South Dakota State, Brett Taylor at Western Illinois, Farley at Northern Iowa. Great players, and DeLuca is above all of them. So he is probably he's the number one defensive impact player, and he's probably the number one impact player overall in the Missouri Valley this year.
And you guys, we're talking about impact players. Bichon, you had mentioned Chris Streveler as making the biggest impact on the team. Then you guys talk about Nick DeLuca. Nick DeLuca ranks ahead of Chris Streveler, the number 2 spot in the number 3 in this list. What do you guys think about that, Jay? What do you think?
I had him flipped. I put Streveler number 2, basically because he's going to run that team this year, and if something were to happen to Chris Streveler, that's going to dictate exactly how far South Dakota is going to go. Is he irreplaceable? No, because they have a pretty good backup in Austin Simmons, but Austin Simmons not quite at the level that Chris Streveler is right now. I mean, this guy, you're talking about a guy who threw for just under 2,000 yards, ran for over 800. He accounted for something like 31 out of 41 total touchdowns last year for South Dakota. I mean, I think this guy, and based on everything I've heard in the offseason from his coaches, from his teammates, he has put in the work to become a more well-rounded quarterback. You have to remember, he came in on a short season last year, didn't even have a full offseason to prepare at the quarterback position because he'd been playing some wide receiver at Minnesota. He's been a quarterback all season, or all last season, and then all off season as well. He's worked on a lot of things to become a better player overall, And I just think that the sky is kind of the limit for 15 this year. I think he's going to have a huge year.
And so much depends on him. He's one guy you plan for USD. South Dakota State's got those 3. North Dakota State's got 3 or 4 guys. Everybody else has more than one player that you're going to key on. Streveler is the guy you're going to try to take away for the Coyotes.
At least initially.
Right.
Shawn, you're a Streveler fan. What's your
Yeah, I
opinion
am.
on
I
him?
just think that that dual option, I think guys that handle the football the most have to be looked at that way as the guys that make the biggest impact. And I looked at the biggest impact, not in the league, but the biggest impact to their team. And that's why Streveler and Christion, to me, are 1A and 1B, because you take them out, they're handling the football every play. They're making the checks. They're reading the defense. Yeah, you have capable backups, but you can't replace that experience of those guys that started 10, 12 games last year and what they mean to their programs. That changes everything when you put a different guy behind center. And that's why I would put the quarterbacks above the others.
All right, well, great discussion, guys. I'm definitely looking forward to these. I feel like we can go a lot of places with them. So when we come back, hear about that #1 impact player, Dallas Goedert, get to know him a little bit more off the field.